My heart was racing. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I am putting business too much first now, and I need to look after myself. I left college early, started selling phone cases on the playground. I had an invoice book when I was 11. My first ever person that resigned, I really struggled with. That was like an intense moment when I was like, I'm never going to be like that again.
Welcome everybody to 99 Humans. Today we're here with Jordan Richard, that is a partner but is also a friend. So a little bit of context: when I met Jordan, he was an intern at Google. So that was probably 5 or 6 years ago. Time truly flies. And back then, Jordan did a phenomenal work launching some really, really big projects for Google, including Google Marketing Platforms and many others. Jordan has always been extremely talented. I remember being truly amazed by you, Jordan. And so when you launched your own agency, it truly made sense to me. I was like, okay, seriously, like what would I expect? So it's so amazing to have you here today, and so we can't wait to hear from you.
Really excited to be on here. Thank you for the intro.
Welcome to 99 Humans.
As you know, Jordan, well, from helping us with our branding and helping us with the different elements of actually getting this live, is to really talk about the realities of people leadership and humans working with humans. And so we'd love to hear in your many adventures, whether that's starting your own agency or the work that you do on the side as a consultant and as a content creator and an influencer, or in work before all of that, a story about a time where you faced kind of those messy realities of leadership. And then we'll unpack it together. But you have such a fascinating background that we know you've got some juicy ones, so we'd love to hear.
This most recent kind of period of time coming out of COVID has been really interesting because as a leader, we've had a team which was fully in person, then we've had a team that's fully remote, and now we've got a team that's fully hybrid, and everyone has their own personal needs. And we've always tried to really cater to being open and inclusive and understanding about everyone's kind of situation. So for example, during the last few years, there's been some key life events for a lot of our team members where we wouldn't want them to miss that for the world. Work is important, but we don't want that to get in the way. And so we've tried to build our work schedules and our place of work very flexibly. But with that comes challenges, because being a creative agency, getting together, that messy kind of collaboration, that spontaneous ideation and growth, actually, we've got quite a young team. And so growing them over messages is really, really difficult to do. So for me, I think location is very spoken about, but it's been a real challenge for us to really unite everyone and keep them growing, whether they're in a European country or, in our office. Making that work's been really tricky.
Not just you, as you said. I think it feels like it's playing out in real time in the news and all of our experiences. And for simplicity's sake, to me, it feels like there's kind of this, let's be inclusive and work, with people in the way that they want to work. And the counterbalance is we've got to run the business and have impact, whatever that looks like for each business. And what I hear you saying is, I'm looking for that happy medium. How do we really make those two ends meet? I'm curious, how do you balance those two? And when push comes to shove, does one win over the other for you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think we've definitely put initiatives in place to enable us to do things that cater for whether you're here in person, whether you're remote, wherever you are. So we do something called Friyays, which is a celebration every Friday morning, and everyone presents what they've been up to, and we celebrate each other's work and we give each other kudos. And that has been great because I haven't seen some people in person for years. And that I find is quite challenging because I love building connections and I definitely struggle to do that virtually. So getting to see my team every Friday and for them to see each other is really important because then they don't feel like they're just in their small pod working group. They can see the bigger picture that we're building. And I think to lead a team effectively, they need to see the bigger picture. That we're building not just within their smaller team, but the wider company. So kind of those moments where we've created these hybrid kind of events that we do on a regular basis has enabled us to keep pushing that with the wider team.
I wonder, Jordan, you said this thing that struck with me. You said like people started, their lives and work gets, in the way of their life, which is a totally new concept, societally speaking. Like if we think about 20 years ago, our parents would have never said work is getting on the way of life. Work was sacred. So I'm wondering, did you ever had an employee that said, you know what, screw this. My life is more important. I'm not going to show up at work. I'm going to resign. Bye. Like, was there any time happened this type of conflict?
Yeah, definitely. I think since we've returned to work, it's definitely been the biggest challenge ever so far. And I think like the younger generations right now, you've got social media, which is telling people the best picture of everything and not the messy, real stuff that's going on. And so I think some people who are earlier in their career maybe have an expectation of work which might be slightly unrealistic. And so actually it is a challenge with younger talent to kind of retain and educate on what is realistic, because we have got to run the business and we have got to make profit and survive, and what social media tells us is that people are getting mockers and they're doing fun team stuff all the time, and it doesn't show the actual reality of work. So definitely we've had some moments where employees have gone their own way, but also I think that we're fine with that because I want everyone on our team to be driven and want to be here working with us. So for me, my first ever person that resigned, I really struggled with. That was like an intense moment when someone pulled me aside and said, I need to speak with you. And at that moment, I never thought that was going to be, I'm leaving. They were a very fundamental person. And my heart was racing. And actually, I reflect on it and I was actually not very understanding at first. I actually kind of, all I was thinking about was the business. And from that moment onwards, I was like, I'm never going to be like that again because this is a person's life and they're making choices based on their personal factors. And from that point onwards, whenever there's a moment now like that, I always try to just put myself in their shoes and not think about myself and my business, think about them and what is creating that moment that's caused them to do that.
How did you learn that lesson? Because I feel like I've gone through things where my heart is racing and I don't like the way it goes. I don't know if I always learn that kind of a lesson though. I'm curious if you can pinpoint what helped you cross that chasm.
Yeah, I think there's two things. So one thing is in our company, we love to apply black box thinking, which is essentially, the aerospace kind of concept of when there's a failure or something doesn't go as smooth as you want, do a retrospective on it, do a wash up and learn from it. And so, for example, we're always hosting what we call wash ups where we get together and we review something that happened and we discuss it as a team and what could have gone better. So after this person handed their notice in, we did a wash up on it and we actually asked for their feedback too. And they gave some very clear feedback on that, this was a personal decision of what I wanted to do, and you kind of, didn't support that, and that didn't make me feel great. And so from that point onwards, I was always thinking now, it's not about me, it's about the employees and how they feel, and we should be supporting them through that. So I think that was one thing. And another thing is, when you get those feelings that just something wasn't quite right, afterwards you're like, that didn't sit well with me. And I think maybe at my own expense, I think too much about things. Maybe I've got some anxious kind of traits there, but I just felt that something didn't sit right, and so therefore I wanted to make sure that I learned from that.
I am amazed, Jordan, by how mature you are as a leader. I don't know if we can say your age in this podcast, but because I know it, it's mind blowing. Like, you apply leadership wisdom that even people in their 50s sometimes don't apply. And so I love this wash up concept that you just shared apply to people management. It's like, hey, this happened. Can we dissect it? My question for you is how you get inspired. How did you become Jordan the leader?
Yeah, I think this actually ties in well with my kind of journey, in that I actually really didn't get on well with education. I left college early, and I struggled to really engage with school. And so even at school, I started selling phone cases on the playground. Uh, I had an I had an invoice book when I was 11. When I went to the pound shop, I said to my mum and dad, I don't want a toy, I want an invoice book, a carbon copy one. And I would invoice them to mow the lawn and to wash their cars. And I
I'm
think for
impressed also
me,
by your parents that went well for you to invoice
yeah,
them.
I gave them back 3 weekends. And I guess I've always been playing with business because it just fascinated me. And so I think what I did later on in my career is I noticed that I was creative, and so I connected the two. So all of the businesses I have involve a level of creative of some sort. And that, because I'm so driven about it, I'm always wanting to learn about it. So for me, if I read a book, it will be about an entrepreneur, or it'll be about leadership. I just really am immersed in the whole concept of business and entrepreneurship.
So, Jordan, as somebody who took kind of the road less traveled with your own career path and life path, when you look at those younger folks, as you say, and the maybe unrealistic expectations they have, there's, I think, a part of that thinking that is, well, the system's broken. We got to reboot the system. The expectations are, that's what's wrong. I understand my expectations are broken, but I want to change the expectations. How do you kind of rectify that divergent thinking on the system needing a reshift and the realities, as you're saying, of running the business? And yes, at least right now, this is what we've got to do to keep things afloat.
I think definitely one thing is that I'd love to inspire the younger generations on all of the diverse options they have available to them in getting started. I think too often families, friends, colleagues maybe push you into decisions that, or at least lead you towards decisions that are based on their experience and maybe not what's right for you. And I think that um, apprenticeships, for example, that was the route I took to get into Google, or actually work experience is maybe not seen as desirable for some people as going to university, but actually it suits different types of people. And so I think that maybe if someone isn't in the right job, or they're not feeling driven and motivated earlier on in their career when they're young, maybe it's because they're taking a path that wasn't quite right for them. And so if we can educate younger people on all the different options they have available in terms of getting into business, whether they want to run their own business,
Mm.
whether they want to, take an education pathway or a hands-on pathway, I think that will enable us to create more people who are passionate and who have grown from ground up into their careers.
You know, again, because I'm so amazed by you, right? Like I'm your number one fan. And when I look at the plunge that you took, because I don't know if you can say it, but back then I remember Google had offered you a position, and so many kids at your age would have been like, "Oh my God, Google is offering me a position," in London, the biggest EMEA office. Like you were in rooms with VPs back then, Jordan. Like many other Googlers. Like I remember we were flying you to New York. We were flying you to places like you were a star. Like everyone wanted to have a piece of Jordan. And then you decided, no, this is not for me. I'm going to take the plunge. I want to build my own company. And, we're like, oh, that's amazing, it's amazing. But also, like, how do you deal with the pressure that is given by financial responsibilities? Like, all these people are on your paycheck. Like, if you make or break, their families, might have food on the table or not, or paying the rent. Like, how you deal with all this pressure?
Yeah, it is really tough, I have to admit. And I think um, something I haven't done maybe earlier on in founding the business was I put business way too much first. And that made me suffer as a leader, and therefore my team suffered. So actually, something actually happened, right? I actually had a really, really bad moment where I was on the floor, my heart was racing. I thought I was going to have a heart attack because I was so stressed and anxious. And luckily, it was just a panic attack. But that moment kind of really shook me up and made me go, hang on, I am putting business too much first now. And I need to take a step back and I need to look after myself. And from that moment onwards, I really sorted out my morning and evening routine. Because as boring as routine sounds, it's really enabled me to consistently put myself first before the workday. And that's had a knock-on effect because then when I come to work, I'm energized, I'm more calm and understanding and more present as well. And then that benefits my team. So, and actually, it's also inspiring them now to do the same thing, which means everyone is performing better. And we're slowly trying to grow the wellness of the team through, we call it Be Your Best sessions. So we kind of talk about how you can be your best personally and professionally, whether it's through getting good sleep or eating well or exercising or following a hobby. So I think that starting a business is tough. Having the weight of lots of people relying on you is really tough. But if you don't put yourself first and look after yourself, you're not going to be able to handle that effectively.
I was just reading that mental wellness is actually the number one topic in influencers today. So, of all the influencers, what everybody's talking about, the ones who have the most subscribers are about mental wellness. And this is definitely a new trend. And it feels like experiences, like you've said, we are still having them every single day. I'm curious, like there's the oh my gosh, there's something physical happening to me. But I'm sure it also wasn't the first time you had heard it. Put yourself first. And so I'm curious if you can identify what kept you from maybe realizing the lessons, the books that you had read, the reality that, yeah, that is maybe the right approach, didn't sink in until there was this big scary moment.
Yeah, I think often actually we always assume everything's all right until it's not, until something actually happens. And I think it's a good example of any aspect of business, right? Whether we're talking about revenue, for example, where agencies go through huge peaks and troughs of being really busy and then really quiet. And if you take your foot off the gas, at any point, you'll see a delayed effect. And so I think it's the same with mental health and wellness. You could look after yourself for a bit and then be feeling amazing, and then maybe take your foot off the gas, and you won't notice it until maybe a few weeks later, and it will catch up with you. And then by then it's too late, because now you need to start getting back onto it again, and then you've got a delayed effect. So actually, I think something which I've always tried to do is make sure that it's always on. Like, consistency really is key, because I don't want to have to wait for these triggers to tell me something's not right, Jordan. You need to fix it. I need to prevent that from happening. And I love reading the book Atomic Habits, because it kind of obviously mentions how, rather than taking big leaps and then not doing it for a while, just do those small steps. Read a couple of pages each night, or just do 10 minutes on the treadmill, and then you'll do maybe 10 minutes more. So I'm always trying to, with well-being, I'm always trying to make sure it's always on, and I'm doing small achievable things, rather than trying to meditate, exercise, go for a walk, read a book, and do everything every morning.
I mean, this concept that you just shared is pretty powerful. And I love that this podcast is becoming also book recommendation. Every guest is always sharing their book. Atomic Habits is here in my library, so I gotta I gotta read it next. It's so big though, so it's a bit scary sometimes. This concept that when you realize that you have a problem, chances are it's too late. Um, and we hosted a self-compassion workshop for my team on Wednesday. And the number one responsibility that we truly have that make it or break it is to be present. Because if we are present with our bodies, our heads, our thoughts, and we recognize the signals, then we can do something about it. So thinking about your day, because you have so much on your plate, what do you do to be present?
Yeah, presence is really, really tough, and it's something I'm always trying to work on, because I hate it when maybe I'm on a call, or maybe I'm actually having an in-person meeting, right? And my brain is thinking about something else, or I'm out for a walk with a friend and I'm not actually listening, I'm thinking about work. And I reflect on those moments, and I'm like, I've just wasted that time. I'm not going to get that back. I'm not going to get that moment back. Um, and I think for me, my calendar, as every leader probably has, is very busy, but I make it work for me in that if it's not in the calendar, it's not going to happen. And I actively book out time for everything I'm going to do, because that helps me to reduce multitasking and to reduce trying to do something else when I should be present. So at the start of every day, I'll block out time for tasks, time for breaks, time to go for a walk, time to see my friend in the evening. And I try as much as possible to be wholly in that moment when I'm there. So I even book out time to do emails, for example, because often we can forget that we need to do that, and we'll just be like, oh, we'll just do it around all the meetings and other things we've got on. But it's unrealistic. So I think if it's not in my diary, it's not going to happen, and I'm not going to be present in it. And I try to really, really live by that.
You mentioned doing regular sessions with your team on these topics as well, trying to help them. And one of the things that I am struggling with recently in real time, I'm curious if you've got tips, is how do you help folks who are struggling with exactly this concept? Like, there's a part of me that can identify people who have that same drive, that same desire for impact and, activity and busyness, but you can see a critical moment coming, but maybe they haven't learned the lesson yet. All the workshops, all the books, same kind of thing, but you almost feel like as a leader, some responsibility. And I'm curious if there's a disconnect on, well, everyone will, figure it out on their own. There's obviously the support that we can provide, but also some balance of there's only so much you can do as a leader.
I think that if someone's overworked, they might notice it when the negative thing happens where they're really, drained, or they have to take a sick day because they've run out of motivation and energy. And I think that as leaders, we need to do a better job of spotting things ahead. And something that I try to do as well is we have shared diaries across the company, and so we actually see how our team are planning stuff, and then we can facilitate whether that is going to be too much or not, and have an open conversation. So we run our team with stand-ups every day, and that's a great way to really connect and kind of go, what's happening today? Are you guys overworked? You haven't got enough work? Are you feeling stressed? And we keep these in really small pods. We don't do it as like 20 people. We do it in like pods of 2 or 3. And that means that it can be more personal and people can be more open. I think if you have too big a groups of people, they're not gonna, be as open and kind of like honest about stuff. So I think the key is actually having these more personal, smaller group conversations to enable people to be honest about stuff.
I love that combo of being vulnerable yourself, kind of creates that safety for others to talk about this, but then taking the responsibility as the leader to not just make time for the conversation, but make it the topic of conversation. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's really where, okay, everybody
Mm-hmm.
has the moment. Maybe they still will need to learn it
Mm-hmm.
themselves, but with those two actions, that sounds
Mm-hmm.
like quite a lot of inspiration and room for people.
Mm.
Yeah,
I mean, those are things that, I always say like, there are simple things that go a long way.
yeah.
Mm.
And I think as well, data is really key because if you don't track stuff, you can't see the trend and the way it's going. So as much
Mm.
as we want to be human and quite organic and have these like stand-ups and conversations, we also need maybe some data sometimes to tell us what trajectory we're going on. And so we have like weekly and monthly surveys which are anonymous. And that just
Mm.
at least gives us some data and numbers where we can track where is the team heading in terms of how busy they are, how stressed they are, how driven they feel, how much they think they're growing. So actually, sometimes data is the key to really seeing where stuff is going.
Mm-hmm. Jordan, we are approaching the end of the podcast, and I still have personally a zillion of questions, but one of those, like, why RCCO? I never guessed the name of your agency. What does it stand for, RCCO?
Yeah, it stands for our process. So it's research, concept, creative, and optimization.
I love it. I love it. And so if you think about the people that are listening to you right now, right? That could be, people that are deciding what to do next in their lives, people that are, maybe entrepreneurs and they're going through a tough time, like you are. Like, what would be your recommendations for these people?
One thing is that you should be resourceful. I
Mm,
think often we're not resourceful enough. We've gone through life and made many connections. How can you lean on your network and connections? Thinking with a startup mindset is thinking, how can we get the most value from the least resource? Sometimes we need to be a bit scrappy. I think that we put way too much pressure on perfection in business and leadership. And that's the whole point of this podcast, right? And book is that it's not perfect. And so allowing this like 80-20 kind of process of, if we get 80% there and we test it and we see if it works, rather than really stressing over that final 20%, has been a way that I've personally enabled us to grow quite fast, because we're not getting caught up in that 20%. We're always thinking about the big 80% kind of chunks that we can do. And when we find something that works, we then focus on the 20%. So being a designer as my background, perfectionist comes to mind, but I've really had to retrain my mind in that nothing is going to be perfect. We've just got to do it as good as we can and learn from it.
Mm.
There's a lot of mental wellness in that last bit as well, in terms of, just lowering the standard is what I'm thinking of. That sounds negative, but I really do think that 80% is a, sort of healthy way to move forward, and then you can optimize that last piece, the O of RCCO there, once you've found it.
Mm.
Exactly.
And I mean, let's face it, if someone is delivering an 120, 130% every time, their 80% is still going to be 100% of someone else. I remember a coach once told me, remember that your ceiling might be, no, what is it? Your bottom might be someone else's ceiling, something like that. Like, how can we make sure that we also look at ourselves in the mirror and say, hey, you know what? Chill.
Not to mention,
Yeah.
something's going to give, like your personal life, like your personal relationships. Maybe that's where you're giving 20%.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The energy jars. I did a LinkedIn post about this today. Jordan, where can people find you? Like if the listeners want to connect with you, if they want to connect with RCCOO, where are you? Do you have a website? Tell us that your social and digital identity.
Yes, I would love for people to follow and connect with me on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. It's where I put all of my thoughts and inspiration. So you can find me on Jordan Richards, or my handle is RCHDS. And you can also find our website for RCCO. It's rcco.uk.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining, Jordan, sharing your stories, your wisdom. Congratulations on the success you've had. And thank you for your help to 99 Humans.
Yeah.
It's been amazing. Yeah, I've loved being a part of the process and can't wait for the output.
Us too.
Totally. And more to come.